Okay. All right. So it's time to start. And I would like to welcome everyone who is here today with Alicia, Tasha, and I. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Gali, and I work at CLOCKSS as the Collection Development Director. And with me today are Tasha Mellins-Cohen and Alicia Wise. And we will be talking about clocks and Counter working together to support open access and usage. But before we start, I would like to mention that we are going to record this session. So if anyone wouldn't like to be seen or heard, you are welcome to shut down your cameras and your microphones. You will still be able to post questions without a problem. But if you wouldn't like to see yourselves recorded, then you're welcome to do that. Okay. Um, I think we're recording, Alicia. What do you think? Yes, we are. So, okay. All right, everybody's ready. So let's start. Tasha and Alicia, why don't we start with you? Just tell us a little bit about yourselves and your organization and what you do. Tasha, shall we start with you?
Sure. Hi, I am Tasha Mellins-Cohen. I am the Executive Director at Counter Metrics. So we have been around for 22 years and we are the industry standard for usage metrics, which means we host and manage and maintain and support the code of practice, which defines how publishers around the world should count and report usage of their digital content. My big project for the last couple of years has been getting release 5.1, which is the latest iteration of the code, not just published, but also implemented by so far more than 200 publishers. And we're a membership organization, which means we are not for profit. And we currently have somewhere in the region of about 300 members worldwide. Um, yeah, we're a very tiny. I know CLOCKSS is small, but we have in total 27 hours a week of resource. Most of that is me. So we really are operating on a tight time budget.
Yeah. But an important job that you do, Tasha. So good for
We
you.
try to make it fair so that everyone is being measured in the same way and
Mm,
reported in the same way. And I'm sure we're
absolutely.
going to come on to why that matters for OA
Yes,
shortly. But
exactly.
Alicia,
Alicia.
Sure. I was just actually thinking about the fact that Tasha must always be in good company on a small team with a wonderful person. You are
Mhm.
always in good company. And also back to the days before Counter existed, and it was the Wild West. Everybody counted everything differently, and you couldn't compare and contrast between publisher services. So it's a really
For sure.
invaluable service you all provide. Um, I hope we do the same at CLOCKSS. We're about the same age. We started life as a project at Stanford University back in the 1990s, when librarians started to become very nervous about their traditional role preserving academic scholarship in the transition from print publication to digital publishing, because licensing content, they didn't have the rights that they needed anymore to make copies for preservation purposes. And so the solution was really clever. The people involved back then were visionary, and they set up CLOCKSS as a partnership between libraries and publishers. It's an international partnership, and our mission is to um, receive content from publishers all over the world and to preserve it for the very long term. So think 300 or 500 years from now, when none of our organizations may exist any longer, the content entrusted to all of us as part of the scholarly record should be continue to be accessible, and that's CLOCKSS's mission. Um, it's a member-owned and controlled initiative, and we're entrusted right now with about 60 million journal articles and hundreds of thousands of academic books and feel that responsibility
Yeah.
for protecting that information very
Right.
keenly indeed.
Right. A question for Tasha, please. So how does Counter's approach to usage metrics support transparency and accountability in the open access environment? Could you comment on that?
So there's a really common trope that is said fairly frequently by OA advocates and others that open access increases usage. And the challenge with that, of course, is we all take this on trust. But if we're not measuring the open access usage in the same way as we're measuring the counter usage, like the traditional subscription content, we're not comparing apples to apples. We're not even comparing apples to oranges. We're comparing apples to beach balls. Traditional web-based analytics, one, they're opaque. We don't actually know what they're measuring. Two, they typically do not exclude bots particularly effectively. Three, they will not deduplicate usage by user, so you're going to inflate the numbers quite significantly. Whereas with Counter, you know exactly what is being counted, you know you're eliminating bot usage, and we have these things called unique metrics, so unique item requests and unique title requests that deduplicate the usage count by any given user within a session. So you're not having this inflation. And for open access, where usage really is much more global, it's incredibly important to be able to say, we know what we're counting, we know what we're measuring, and we're doing it to the same standards as anybody else. And I feel much the same way about Counter as I do about something like JATS or about using DOIs and ORCIDs. We have this infrastructure. It has been developed very carefully and, okay, yes, quite slowly in a lot of cases over many years. It's all there to be built upon, and we need to build in it or build on it rather than throwing things away and starting again.
Right.
If we want open access to be taken as seriously as it should be, and if we want this stuff to be persistent and impactful, we can't say that it should be treated as its own separate thing. It
Right.
needs to be treated the same way as everything else. So
Right.
that's my personal hill that I will die on. Everything should be measured the same way to be fair. Um,
Right.
that's
That
part of
makes,
it.
yeah, that makes total sense. Alicia, could you talk a little bit about, how clocks plays a role in the open access environment, and what does clocks does to ensure the long-term access to content when it becomes open access.
Sure thing, Gali. And I'm going to start with Tasha's really interesting word. She just was talking about persistence. Bless you, Tasha. Um, Persistence of the scholarly record is really essential because scholars of the future will build on and advance the work of scholars of today and of past years. And so the scholarly record needs to be persistent if human knowledge and culture is to advance. And open access content is accessible now, but it's not inherently guaranteed to be persistent, to remain accessible in the future, unless steps are taken to collect and curate an authentic, authoritative version of the open access content. And that is the work of a digital preservation archive like CLOCKSS. We are entrusted with an original copy, and we take steps to make sure that that version remains in persistent management. So let me explain how we do it. That'll make it less opaque. What we do is we replicate the publisher's authoritative version in 12 secure stores in different parts of the world, in places like Japan and Canada, in the UK, in Italy, in Germany, in Australia, and in other countries as well. And those 12 stores are constantly talking to one another. And so if a single bit or byte in any of those file stores changes, the other 11 detect this change and they automatically take steps to repair the damaged copy. By ensuring that open access content is preserved in this way, we're ensuring that the authoritative version that the publisher and author intended to be disseminated and used remains available and it isn't damaged in case of an earthquake or a tsunami or a hacking event, a ransomware attack, or just human error in moving between platforms.
And can you talk about a little bit about how do we handle what we call triggered content and make it open access? And what does that mean?
Sure, and I have a question for Tasha about this, so this will be a good segue. So the content that CLOCKSS is preserving is not accessible, and that's because we're managing it very carefully so it remains pristine and authentic. And also because it's made accessible by the authors and the publishers. But if they should ever stop doing that, say the publisher goes out of business, we have a contract in place and the rights that we need to bring the content out of our archive. And that's when we make it openly accessible to everyone under a Creative Commons license. And we call that a trigger event, opening up access to everyone in the world in perpetuity. So triggered content is really important. And at the minute, we just make it accessible from two servers, one in Edinburgh and one in Stanford, and through a little web interface. It's nothing fancy, but we're looking for more sophisticated ways to surface and share that information, to look at how it and understand how it's being used, and to take steps to better integrate it with the active scholarly record. And Tasha, this is where I'm sort of fascinated to learn for open access content, what steps can we take to make sure that that triggered content can be tracked, we can understand where and how it's being used?
So there are various services that will integrate with anyone to track from a counter perspective to track usage from in compliance with the counter standard. I actually suspect that from the CLOCKSS standpoint, you might want to look at somebody like DataCite because they've built the most fantastic little widget that can be implemented for any repository and that will track usage data. They haven't quite done it yet for standard journal or book content, but I don't think that's something that would be particularly complicated. And it's certainly one of the things that I would love to do, and I know that DataCite are keen to do it, is to find funding to build that out, to make it available to any open access publisher, or indeed to any small publisher who simply can't afford full counter compliance at this point in time. Because as with any standard, it's complicated and it can be expensive. So maybe that's a project that we could collaborate on.
I love that. And tell me a little bit more. So put the widget on your hosting platform where your open access content is being made accessible. And is that widget like an all-powerful agent? Does it do everything, or is there some manual intervention and
minimal manual intervention? So the main thing that you would need to do is to take the information generated by the widget is on a per article or per book chapter basis. So we work on the basis of what we call items, which you can think of an item as being anything that has a DOI. So the unit of usage is an article or a chapter, not a whole journal. So that would be an item, would be an article. A title would be a journal. You would want to aggregate that usage per article into a report, but that's a fairly straightforward thing to do compared with actually tracking the usage in the first place.
Right. Cool.
There's projects on the go. So we actually have our advisory committee is meeting on Thursday. Trying to think. Yep, 26th, Thursday. And one of the projects that we're looking at is something that's been bubbling along for a little while, but has not quite ever got to the point of being ready to go live. which we're calling either pathways to compliance or lowering the barriers to entry. It's the same kind of concept of saying if you're tiny, if you cannot get from not doing usage tracking at all to doing full counter metrics, how can we help you get there? What are the incremental steps that you could take to get there? So, for example,
Interesting.
we know
Yeah.
that audit's the expensive bit. Can we find a way to sort of do some form of community validation rather than a full audit?
Right. So I have a question for both of you. Now that we all like kind of heard what CLOCKSS is doing, what Counter is doing, how are we, addressing open access? Could you just brainstorm together and for the audience, and we're going to bring the audience in very shortly. How do you think CLOCKSS as a preservation service and Counter really complement each other and will be working together in the future from your perspective?
I think there are a number of ways. So we serve similar and overlapping communities, and we're both community owned and governed. So I think working well and efficiently together is just kind of part of our DNA. It's hardwired in the way all three of us think, and our communities as well. We're committed to standards and standards development and can mutually support and help raise awareness about that. Um, I think we're all aligned with POSI, the
Yeah.
open infrastructure principles that guide how services evolve in the open scholarship landscape. Um, and Tasha's just smart, and a huge comfort to know that you've got a super smart colleague next door dealing with a similar sort of sized organization with a similar sort of mission, so you can always bounce ideas off of one another. But what would you say, Tasha?
Well, start with thank you. That's lovely to hear. I would say it's even more fundamental. We are both foundational infrastructures, and this community, scholarly communication, the knowledge community, whatever you want to call us, we have a really deep reliance on these foundational infrastructures, whether that's CLOCKSS or Counter or Crossref for DOIs or ORCID for other persistent identifiers. We're really reliant on this very small group of foundational infrastructures and standards, without which everything else falls over. And we're also, none of us is a big, well-funded organization. I know we can, from sitting where we are, sitting where you are, probably we're looking at Crossref and just thinking, God, I would do anything to have that amount of money or that amount of resource. But for the reliance that we as a community put on these bodies, they're all fairly shoestring operations, and we get a huge amount of value out of them. So yes, we're operating in different bits of that foundational infrastructure, but we're both really necessary.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And the collaboration between a lot of those open infrastructures is powerful. You've mentioned Crossref, for example, and they are terrific. We couldn't trigger content and bring it out of the CLOCKSS archive effectively without Crossref, because they actually help us redirect all of the DOIs
Mhm.
from the
Right.
disappeared publisher's original platform to the archival copies that are now the formal part of the scholarly record. And we're entrusted by them to actually preserve the Crossref metadata. So it's all sorts of unseen, unknown collaboration between these open infrastructures that also forms the fabric, the woven,
Right.
the weft and the warp. I don't know. I'm getting out of control of my metaphor.
Yeah,
Right.
Part of that foundational infrastructure as well.
Right.
I think
Right.
that takes us to one of the questions that's in the Q&A, which is, does a CLOCKSS trigger event have to be a disaster? Could it be a publisher ceasing to support a journal?
It can be a publisher ceasing to support a journal. And in that case, a publisher will usually approach us and to say, we're going to sunset or mothball
Mm.
a journal. Will you now provide access to it? So we have some examples of that. In the open access space, I think one that we recently announced was the Journal of Home Research, which was originally published by Stockholm University Press on the Ubiquity platform. And so we coordinated amongst the three of us to provide that triggered access. And it's a fascinating little journal, actually. If you're interested in linguistics and how primarily children, but also adults in different parts of the world pick up their early language skills or bilingual language skills. It is full of really helpful information, and I'm thrilled that it continues to be part of the scholarly record.
Right. And I just, for all the attendees, I just put in a link in the chat so you can go to our website and see all the triggered content there. You'll notice there's many different forums, journals, topics, disciplines. So it's all open. You can check it out via the link.
So
Tasha,
sorry, Gali.
yes,
I was
go ahead.
going to ask about, I know one of our big challenges in the open access space is the number of journals that just disappear, that don't get preserved. And I'd love to know, what can we as a community do to help support CLOCKSS to get hold of that content that isn't preserved and should be? And I hate to use the word diamond because I don't think it means anything a great deal, but they tend to be journals that don't have obvious sources of financial support.
Absolutely brilliant question, and thank you for that, Tasha. So Martin Eve's done some really interesting research showing that of the ISSNs that have ever been minted, um, only around 75% can be found in the collections of long-term archives like CLOCKSS, which means 25% of our journal and magazine literature is hugely vulnerable. And even the 75% that are preserved in at least one place, a very tiny fraction of that are preserved in at least 3 archives, which is considered best practice. So journals, long established, fundamental to scholarship, vulnerable. Diamond open access journals or scholar-led journals of all kinds tend to be particularly difficult to reach. And even if you can get to the editors or the publishers and advocate, and they agree that their journal would like to be preserved or should be preserved, they often are running on a shoestring with some volunteer effort, and they don't necessarily have a lot of time or technical capacity. So CLOCKSS has been working in partnership with organizations like DOAJ and Internet Archive on a project called Jasper. So any open access journal that is indexed in DOAJ and particularly Diamond journals, we have created a pipeline, so it's very easy to get your content and your metadata from one service into the CLOCKSS archive. Who else are we partnering with? OAPN, which is a delivery platform for open access books. And people like Ronald Schneider, fantastic to work with. Any publisher hosting 5 or fewer books in OAPN can have those preserved by CLOCKSS at no cost. And there's an easy way to
Wow.
get that content in. And we're doing a cool pilot at the minute. We're hearing from a lot of library presses or university-based scholar-led journals that, again, they have practical administrative challenges in getting their material preserved. So we've reached out on a pilot basis to our supporting libraries, and we've said if you have publications on your campus through a library press or scholar-led publications, let us know. And as long as you continue to be part of the library supporting CLOCKSS, we will preserve those materials at no additional costs. That's just launched, but we're getting really positive feedback so far.
Right.
Really cool. I had
Yeah.
no idea you guys were doing that. That is really cool because so the half of my time that isn't counter, I'm an OA consultant. I work with not-for-profits. And one of the things that I come up against again and again and again is lack of standards compliance because they simply often they are scholar-led, researcher-led, and they don't know about things like JATs and they don't know about things like DOIs, and they may not even have library support internally, but they certainly don't know about preservation. So a chunk of my time is spent trying to encourage people to at least preserve the PDFs even if they're doing nothing else. Please don't let this disappear.
Thank you for that. And it takes that kind of advocacy and that information. We're committed to trying to ensure that the cost of participation isn't a barrier for any library or publisher anywhere in the world. We're committed to equitable, global, geographic pricing. And we're always open-minded about different approaches to support that long tail of small publishers in particular.
Yeah.
So not quite the same, but we introduce completely free membership for libraries and publishers in Research for Life countries for 2025. And then for 2026, because it takes a bit of effort to try and work out what the pricing should be for countries that are outside Research for Life. And partly it's just a logistics problem of I have to do all the invoicing manually for membership. So for 2026, we are introducing sort of what we're calling global equity pricing, which is
so important. But by the way, as you were speaking, I put more links in the chat for all the attendees about Counter members, the Project Jasper. I'm going to put a link also for library support for CLOCKSS. As Alicia was saying, there's a pilot going on. And if you are or becoming a library supporter, we will preserve your diamond journals without any additional cost. So Tasha, Alicia, we're almost at the end of our little chat here, and I would like to open the chat and the Q&A. But as far as the future hold, and I know you've been around this arena for a while. Any thoughts about where we're going as far as open access preservation, trying to track all these in a standard way? Just whatever you think the future hold, and what do you think libraries and other stakeholders, what part would they take?
How pessimistic can we be?
Oh,
oh no.
No, so I think we're in for a rocky few years. I think there's a lot of changes that have been happening in terms of open access mandates, in terms of funding shifts, and many other there's been a lot of moving pieces over the last few years. And the policy landscape does have an impact on preservation and open access and everything that we do, which, given how quickly the policy landscape is changing and how we are member organizations, which means we can only move as fast as our members want us to move. So we're always one or two steps behind. So I think that there's a need for a lot more. And that is going to present a challenge. Having said that, I don't think digital publishing is going anywhere. I don't think scholarly publishing is going to disappear overnight. For the last 25 years since I've been in this industry, I've had people saying to me, journals won't exist in 10 years' time. We're still here. Until there's a much, much bigger shift in research culture than I have seen to date, I don't think researchers are going to stop publishing in journals or books. And as long as journals and books exist, we need to exist.
and maybe it's a glass half empty, half full thing. I'm really excited about where we are at the minute because we're seeing a lot of dynamism in different approaches to scholarly communication. I'm thinking of the publication of preprints, post-publication peer review, all sorts of dynamic business models, the Diamond Capacity Hub, lots of discussion for the first time about how open infrastructures are preserved. So it seems like a really large number of very smart people around the world are working to sustain open scholarship and to let it evolve as needs change, which of course brings challenges. And I'm being a bit Pollyanna-ish about smoothing over those, but it means we live in a dynamic world. I guess from a preservation perspective, it feels like there's more work to be done, but the message is getting out. Just because a piece of scholarship is open does not mean it's preserved. Just because that open scholarship is backed up doesn't mean it's preserved. Your backup can get degraded or lost just as easily as the original can. So preservation is important. There's quite a lot of innovation happening right now about how to make it more discoverable, which books and journals are in which repositories and archives. And I think that's really important because if we all surface what we're collecting, we can, for the first time, think about how to cost effectively collaborate to make sure that all scholarship in all countries is preserved and protected well, but without that duplication of effort. And I think that will be tremendous, not only in saving time and money, but in thinking about the carbon footprint of our operations and how to protect our environment as well.
Right.
So looking forward to working with people like you on these sorts of.
That makes me feel so much more positive because you said effectively the same thing, that there's a lot going on and not enough time to do it all, but with a much more positive spin. So thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Tasha, Alicia. And now to our nice audience, if you have questions or even a comment, you don't have to ask anything you would like to maybe express an opinion, let us know what your perspective is. Please go ahead. You can raise your hand or type in.
And Kelly, can people
Yeah.
actually come on screen and talk to us in real?
I believe so. I think so. I am not sure.
Intention, but whether we know how to work the technology to make
Yeah, I know we have to work. Yeah, we have to. I think I kept all the audience on audio and video. So I take a look.
Well, while we're waiting, I have a question for Alicia. Since you took over CLOCKSS, what's been your absolute highlight? What's been the thing that you have enjoyed learning the most?
It's always trigger events, making content accessible and knowing that it would have been lost to humanity is just such an honor and a privilege, and it's a real buzz. And from a technical perspective, every single trigger event is really different. So our colleagues in the Stanford University Library LOCKSS program who do the technical work to make it possible, they are super smart people, and they really have to bring all of their technical nous to bear because the content that's archived might have been published in the 1970s. It might have been digitized multiple times. It's evolved. Maybe there were corrections or errata or retractions. There are multiple formats there. The metadata, not always as nice as might be desired. So there's a lot of intellectual and technical effort to go into bringing that content out of the archive. And our most heavily used triggered piece of content at the minute is a journal called Heterocycles, which is a foundational journal in heterocyclic chemistry. I don't even know what heterocyclic chemistry is. I'm an archaeologist, but I like going in and looking at it now and again because I just feel privileged to have been a small part of the efforts to continue
Yeah,
that heavily used by
yeah.
heterocyclic chemists around the world.
I was a
Alicia, we have
biochemist by training, and I still don't know what that means.
Alicia, I think you're the host. We have Philip Adams with a hand. I think he needs to be unmuted.
Oh, do I need
Hi,
to?
Oh, you're here. Hi,
I'll just
Philip.
say hello to everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, I work in a library, and we spend a lot of time using counter stats to look at the value of our subscriptions.
Mm-hmm.
Are they being read by our users? But when it comes to the open access world, it's a different question.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm interested in, of the articles that we published, has anyone read them?
Yeah.
So how would I go about using, does Counter lend itself to answering that kind of question?
Yeah. So we have, so in release 5, which was developed way back in 2016 and then really reinforced within release 5.1, which was, it was published in 2023 and came into force in January. We have the concept of what are called global reports. And we have been encouraging publishers to offer global item reports. So that's article level usage reporting, covering all usage around the world, whether or not it can be attributed to any given institution. And that global item reporting can be called down to the level of a specific DOI. So if you know the DOIs that your articles, that your researchers have published, you can call those and say, these are the ones that I want to know the usage of. If you look at the Counter registry, you will see a tag for Global Item Report or GIR that will let you know which publishers have started offering those already. It's mostly the ones that are supported by Scholarly IQ, though a few others have implemented it. I know that Silverchair are planning to introduce it because there was a huge amount of publisher interest in doing that when I did a webinar for them last month. We do have on the Counter website, if you go to countermetrics.org/education, there is an entire friendly guide and a video. And I'm sorry if you have to watch me talk in another video, but there is a video about how to do Counter for open access. And that might be a helpful place to take a look next.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Philip,
thank you.
Does that answer your question?
It definitely points me in the right direction. Yeah.
Well, you always have Tasha's contact info.
I will say I try really hard to keep on top of my emails, but I'm not always as quick as I would like to be. So if it is more than a week and you haven't heard from me, by all means, chase.
Right. Okay.
Actually, can I ask Philip a follow-up question? So, Philip, is it your academics on your campus, you're interested in how their stuff is being used when it's open access, or is it things that you are publishing in your library, or is it a bit of both?
Yeah, it definitely could be both. It's probably because the system means that at least some of our research has been paid for by us, and we'd want to know, well, what return did we get on that investment? But we have 2 journals that our academics have been responsible for looking after, and one of them is ongoing, and one of them is at the decidedly vulnerable stage that we might be talking to CLOCKSS about. That one that you kept safe, or is it in a fit state ready? And I'm slightly worried that it may not be. But yeah, it's both of those. Who has been reading the journals that we want to preserve, because that would make an argument that it is worth the effort of preserving it.
That's really helpful. And if you do have a journal that you're worried about, we're happy to help you get it protected, to take those steps. I always feel that's a sensitive conversation. It's like talking to a person about crafting a will. Nobody really likes to think about a book or journal that they love, that they've invested a lot of time and money in, disappearing. And sometimes that can lead to paralysis. But the right time to preserve a title is before it gets into trouble. But if it is in trouble, or you're not sure if it might be going in that direction, please do reach out and we'll help do whatever we can to support you. But Tasha, in terms of the usage, do those use cases, is the GIR, the global information?
The global item report is perfect for identifying the usage of the stuff that you have funded. So where you've paid for specific articles to be made open access in anyone's journals, you should be able to see the global usage. Again, something that I would love to do in terms of infrastructure collaborations. Ivona Kampfens and I at OA Switchboard have had chats about, could we find a way to get publishers to ship information about usage to OA switchboard so that, say, a year after publication, you can see, right, these are the things that we've paid for, these are the things that are in the switchboard, and there have been X unique item requests for that in the year since publication. Way off in the future, we are nowhere near being able to do that yet. But that's an ideal situation for using global counter usage. Philip, you've popped another question in.
There's another question.
All right. So the counter API, which used to be called sushi, I had too many people say to me, why are you talking about delicious food? So we're now being clear that this is just the counter API. Yes, where open access publishers are counter compliant, they are offering access to their usage reports through the counter API through Sushi. That is going to show up in the counter registry. So if anyone is in the registry, they're offering counter API, you can get all of their details. So you can see the counter API URL and you can see how to get hold of your credentials in the registry. So that's registry.countermetrics.org. So I know that MDPI are in an audit at the moment, and I know I need to create a counter registry record for them because they're finally ready to go in. So that's one of the big open access publishers is there. Obviously, Wiley with the old Hindawi portfolio, Springer Nature with the Biomed Central portfolio. Most big publishers have a lot of OA journals, and that information is available through the main platforms.
Wonderful. Well, we are at the end of our webinar, and thank you very much, Alicia and Tasha, for this amazing conversation. Is there anyone else before we close who would like to ask a question or just talk to us about any topic? I just want to mention that this recording will be posted on both of our websites, and we will be adding some materials there as well, some information about Counter, CLOCKSS, and of course, our contact information. I want to say again, CLOCKSS and Counter are both relying on members and support from the community to keep this important work. So please contact us if you are interested in joining us. You have the links to the membership pages of both Counter and CLOCKSS, and will be lovely to hear from you. And one more thing, if you have any other topics you would like to hear about, please shoot us an email. We'll be happy to get together the experts and have another brilliant session. So thank you. Much appreciated. Thank you, Tasha. Thank you, Alicia. See you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.